That's being passed out. If you could grab an agenda, that would be great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. If you could please take your seats, we're going to begin. My name is Cheryl Miller, and I'm one of the members of the Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group, the MAG. It's an honor to moderate such a prestigious panel of experts, and I want to warmly welcome all of our delegates here in the room and online to Setting the Scene, the title of this session. I also want to especially welcome our newcomers and our IGF youth. I'd like to introduce today's panel. We'll begin with a presentation by our MAG chair, Ms. Lynn St. Amour. We will also be followed by a presentation of the IGF by Mr. Chengetai Masango of the IGF Secretariat. Next, we'll hear from Ms. Marilyn Cade about a session that was held this morning, assessing the role of Internet governance in Sustainable Development Goals. Followed by Mr. Juan Fernandez Gonzalez to talk about sustainable development, internet, and inclusive growth. Next, we'll have Ms. Avri Doria, who will discuss the IGF dynamic coalitions. After Avri, we will have Mr. Flavio Wagner, who will discuss shaping the future of internet governance. Next, we'll have Ms. Jack Simke, who will discuss human rights, broadening the conversation. And following her, we'll have Ms. Renata Aquino Ribeiro discussing trade agreements and the internet. And followed by Ms. Constance Baumelier, IGF Best Practice Forums and Policy Options for Connecting the Next Billion. And last but not least, Ms. Anja Gengo to discuss the national and regional initiatives, national and regional IGFs. So Setting the Scene is a very important main session, and it's actually one of my favorites because it combines new voices to the IGF with the voices of many experts in the internet community. This session is specifically designed to help all of you by providing some insight into the Internet Governance Forum and to assist delegates in deciding which sessions and which workshops you should attend. There is so much going on at this meeting, which is wonderful. And hopefully this session is going to help you to make some choices as to where you should spend time after this session. The Secretariat has done a lot of work behind making sure that it's easy and it's well organized for you to be able to find your different special interest areas. So you can follow your special interests by this color-coded schedule that you'll receive. The session also will look back on the perspective of the 10-year history of the Internet Governance Forum. We'll look at how it began, how did we get where we are, what recent improvements have been suggested, and we'll discuss where we need to go from here. This is a really special IGF because it's our first following our recent 10-year renewal. And I want to thank the government of Mexico for being such a gracious host and a strong supporter of the Internet Governance Forum and the multi-stakeholder model. I'd like to now invite our MAG chair to begin the discussion. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Cheryl, and welcome to everybody here. I'm going to do just a very short introduction. I know I can see a lot of faces here that have been at many IGFs, so some of this you may find repetitive, but maybe you'll actually be reminded of one or two things as well. So the IGF was actually established by the United Nations World Summit on the Information Society, or WSIS. And WSIS was held in two phases, and internet governance was a key issue at both. WSIS 2 recognized the need for a broad-based discussion of public policy issues relating to the internet, and it requested the United Nations Secretary General to convene a new forum for multi-stakeholder policy dialogue called called the Internet Governance Forum. The mandate and the terms of reference for the IGF are set out in paragraphs 72 through 80 of the Tunis Agenda. And these summits were extremely valuable, not only for their formal outputs, but also because it helped to build the community, established a common terminology, gave a broad understanding of multi-stakeholder processes and their associated expectations, and also helped introduce the stakeholders to each other with their own particular set of expectations as well. It really is well worth a read if you haven't read it before, because it really is the underpinning of a lot of the discussions and a lot of the terminology and framework here. So what makes it special or unique? It's unique in that it's convened by the UN Secretary General to be an open, multi-stakeholder forum, bringing all stakeholders together as equals. Its UN mandate gives it convening power and the authority to serve as a neutral space for all stakeholders. The IGF has its administrative home in the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, or UNDESA. And because of the multi-stakeholder nature of the IGF, their contributions may not always be obvious, but their support is critical. The IGF, and this is really very important and really central to its success, is really at its roots a multi-stakeholder entity, a multi-stakeholder activity. It relies on processes and principles which are fundamental to successful multi-stakeholder processes. And I like to say that its DNA, as well as its values and principles, are really based on that of open, transparent, inclusive, and multi-stakeholder processes. Now, many of those principles had actually been established in some of the Internet organizations, in particular the Internet Engineering Task Force and the IETF, some 20 and 30 years ago. However, a lot of those processes were not quite so familiar in some of the other stakeholder groups. So the multi-stakeholder nature of the IGF, coupled with the fact that it's convened by the UN Secretary General, gives us something of a hybrid institution. And I also like to say that that occasionally requires flexibility and understanding from all parties as we actually work to blend or merge different working modalities, different expectations, and different processes. So how's the IGF supported? After WSIS II, a small secretariat was set up in Geneva to support the IGF. It's currently led by Chengetai Masengo, who will be here in a moment. I did see him just a few minutes ago, but he was busy with another matter. Who I have to say does a tremendous job, and frankly with far too few resources. The UN Secretary General, after WSIS II, also appointed a group of advisors, and it's called the Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group, or the IGF MAG. The MAG is made up of 55 members. Half of those come from governments appointed through a process of their own choosing, and one which is commonly used within the United Nations. The other half is split equally across 3 other stakeholder groups: private sector, which I think is pretty clear, civil society, which is equally clear, and a 4th entity that was not common in UN processes, which came to be called the technical and academic community. I think these days it's pretty much called the technical community. That technical community is made up of those organizations that are responsible for large parts of kind of the management or oversight of some of the Internet's core infrastructure, and includes organizations such as the Internet Engineering Task Force, IETF, Internet Society, ICANN, the 5 regional Internet registries, IEEE, W3C. Approximately 1/3 of the MAG turns over each year, which allows new participation opportunities. The UN Secretary General also appoints the chair of the MAG, and I was fortunate this year to have been appointed. I usually take this opportunity to note as well that it's the first time the chair has come not from a government, but from another one of the stakeholder communities, and it is also the first time the chair was a female. So maybe just 2 more quick comments. This is a good opportunity, I think, to remind everyone that the IGF is something called an extra budgetary project of the United Nations. It means that the costs for preparing the forum and support any of the year-round activities relies on voluntary contributions, on donations. It does not come from UN member fees. Obviously, that can sometimes be a fairly limiting factor on what we can achieve. The IGF was actually established to provide a multi-stakeholder platform, and initially it was essentially an annual forum. But it quickly became evident that in order to have more impact, it was necessary to continue work between meetings. And so over the years, a fairly full program of intersessional activities began. I'm not going to comment on those here because we have individual speakers to talk to those activities and where they're going to be represented in the program over the course of this week. Thank you. And I think at that point I turn it over to Brian, I guess.
I think actually we're going to go next with my fellow MAG colleague, Ms. Marilyn Cade. I know that Chengetai is just stuck, so maybe what we can do is he has some very specific information for the 2016 IGF. Maybe we can even end with him so he can give you his perspective. So Marilyn, if you could please continue, that would be wonderful.
Thank you, Cheryl. My name is Marilyn Cade. The title of the session that I helped to co-organize this morning with Igor and with Sagun is Addressing the Role of Internet Governance in the Sustainable Development Goals. It was held this morning in this room, and it lasted for 3 hours, beginning at 10 and ending at 1. The reason we decided to undertake addressing this particular topic and also the format we used was because we understood in the MAG that the importance of the SDGs and the relationship and nexus to Internet governance is extremely important to understand for our community, but it is not well understood enough, even in the communities that are working in Internet governance for some time. So we were trying to create an awareness and a knowledge-sharing opportunity and also to provide a consultation, an active consultation on the views of this community on how Internet governance can help to achieve the IGF, the SDGs. I will just say very quickly, we started out with over 375 people in the room and had close to 150 in the room even at the conclusion of the session. We used a very active town hall where we set by stakeholder groups so that microphones could go to the different stakeholders in a balanced way to take the 3-minute comments. Let me summarize one of our most interesting findings, and we do have an excellent summary prepared by David Suter, who is an expert in both development and Internet governance that will be posted. But basically, we reinforced the understanding that we started with, and that is more work is needed by each of the two communities, the development community and the Internet governance community, to work on how they together can help then to contribute to achieving the SDGs. This idea includes the idea of thinking about how we bring the communities together more aggressively in workshops and main sessions at future IGFs and at the national and regional IGFs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. It sounds like a great session, and thank you for being 2 minutes exactly on the dot. I think that's quite impressive. I'd like to turn next to Chengetai to provide an overview of this year's IGF. Chengetai?
Thank you very much, Cheryl. And I do apologize for coming late, and I also have to leave a little bit early. But yes, I'll go over with the overview of the structure of IGF 2016. As most of you are aware, this is a 4+1 day event, the 4 days of the official meeting, and then we have a day 0 event where in day 0 we have 24 events. Now, the events on day 0 are not part of the official IGF program, so therefore the discussions, etc., do not have to adhere strictly to the rules of the 4-day event from Tuesday onwards. We have the high-level leaders meeting, which is by the host country, and then we also have other meetings like the GigaNet, which is an academic meeting for internet governance issues. So that's on day 0. Now, for the structure of the meeting itself, in the tote bag that you may have received when you registered and got your badges, there's this little booklet here, which is very useful. It outlines everything, and it is color-coded, all the sessions. We have a total of, I think, over 160 events during these days, and we have 32 open forums. Open forums are given to organizations, to often international nature, to advertise or to tell participants about their internet governance related activities. And then we have 8 main sessions, which is one of them is this one, and they all happen in this room. And then we have workshops. For the workshops, we've divided them into several categories, and these categories are access and diversity, critical internet resources, gender and youth issues, cybersecurity, human rights, emerging issues, multi-stakeholder cooperation, and then sustainable development and the internet economy. As you can see in this book, if you go to page 26, it's all color-coded. So if you want to navigate the IGF, you can go by color. For instance, access and diversity is pink. Yes. And critical internet resources is orange. We've also got a Sketch application, which you can access. It's been tweeted, and if you go on our website, you can also get the link to it, and then that you can register for events and also see who is participating in that event in case you want to meet people. So I think that's a very useful scheduling or calendar application that we have. And as you can see, I mean, the venue is really large, and we've got signs all over the place. And also, we try as much as we can to make it as accessible to people with disabilities. So there are elevators. Elevators are a little bit hidden, but you can always ask the people in the orange shirts where the elevators are, but they are there. Now, when you want to contribute to the discussions, it really depends where you are. If you are in the smaller workshops, you just have to raise your hand, and then the moderator will note your name. And then when you are called up to give your intervention, it's very important to state your name clearly and also the organization. And if you're speaking in your personal capacity, you can say, I am of this organization, but I'm speaking on my personal capacity about whatever subjects that you want, which is relevant, of course, to the subject being, the matter being discussed at hand. And this is because we have the transcription, and some names are not very familiar to the transcribers, so we ask you to say the names very slowly, and if it's a difficult spelling, just spell it out for the transcribers. And all this is recorded, as well as everything is being webcast, and then after the event, or if you miss the event, you can go to the website and just view the meeting, view the transcript, and the transcripts are searchable. One note is that these transcripts over this couple of days are raw transcripts, so they may not be 100% accurate, but after the meeting, the transcribers will go through the transcribers and make the transcripts and make them as accurate as possible. In other meeting rooms, especially in a big hall like this, you may have microphones there where you can line up to make your interventions. Now Cheryl is looking at her phone expectantly, so I think I will stop there. But if you have any questions, please just feel free to ask any of us, ask any of the old timers. If you see me walking around, you can approach me. We're very approachable, or come to our offices for any problems that you might have. We have first aid station down. We have a prayer room or a meditation room for people who want to use that. There is one on this venue. So we do try and cater for all sorts of different types of people, of needs, yes. Thank you very much, of needs. Okay, I'll keep quiet now and let somebody else speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all of your hard work, Chengetai. I really appreciate it. And thank you also, Madam Chair, for explaining the IGF mandate, because that's quite important as well. I'd like to move next to my MAG colleague, Mr. Juan Fernandez Gonzalez. Juan?
Muchas gracias, moderadora. Como estamos en el bello México, hablaré en idioma español. Yo soy uno de los organizadores de una de las dos sesiones principales que tendrán lugar mañana miércoles 7 de diciembre. La sesión principal, de la cual soy coorganizador, se llama Desarrollo Sostenible, Internet y Crecimiento Inclusivo. Como ustedes pueden notar, uno de los objetivos de esta sesión principal, tal como lo señala su nombre, es que está relacionado con dos de los temas fundamentales del Foro de Gobernanza de Internet de este año, que es el desarrollo sostenible y el crecimiento inclusivo. Algunos pueden preguntarse por qué esta sesión, si el año pasado tuvimos una semejante. Pues bien, es que en este año queremos avanzar hacia resultados concretos relacionados con el crecimiento inclusivo, teniendo en cuenta que ya está en marcha la Agenda 2030 para el Desarrollo Sostenible, que fue aprobada en las Naciones Unidas el año pasado y, como ustedes conocen, elaboró un conjunto de objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Pues bien, queremos ver cuál puede ser la contribución de Internet a la consecución y el logro de esos objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Para ello, queremos intercambiar las experiencias de todos los participantes en esta sesión principal, de manera tal que aquellas experiencias locales y regionales puedan ser compartidas entre todos los presentes. También tendremos un énfasis en el logro de capacidades, la creación de capacidades, la capacitación para cumplir con lo establecido en el párrafo 72 de la Agenda de Túnez, que llevaba a que la gobernanza de Internet se debía hacer la capacitación en los países en desarrollo para ver cómo puede contribuir al desarrollo sostenible. Y por último, queremos que en esta sesión lograr una mejor comprensión entre todos los actores de cuál debe ser el rol de cada uno para precisamente contribuir a estos objetivos de desarrollo sostenible y crecimiento inclusive. Es por eso que pensamos que esta sesión principal está en el centro del Foro de Gobernanza de este año, que, como ustedes saben, tiene como lema habilitando un crecimiento inclusivo y sostenible. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Juan. I'd like to now turn to my other MAG colleague, Ms. Avery Doria, who's done tremendous work with our dynamic coalitions at the IGF. Avery?
Thank you, Avery Doria. So I'm speaking about the dynamic coalitions. I'm the co-organizer of a session that will be held on Thursday at 15 to 16:30. 12 of the dynamic coalitions have published issue papers on work that they have been doing. Most of this work is work that is relatively mature or work that they hope will be mature within a year, work that they're talking about at this meeting. Dynamic coalitions are the original mechanism created at the IGF for doing ongoing work. And all of the dynamic coalitions meet not only at the IGF, but they meet throughout the year at different venues and online. All of the dynamic coalitions have prepared questions. These questions are on a survey that hopefully has been posted up there, a URL, a survey which is possible to do on paper at the Dynamic Coalition booth, but is also possible to do online at the URL that can be found on the IGF Forum website. The sessions will be moderated, and there'll be a very strong attempt to include as many of the participants, both remote and in the room, as possible. So please be ready with your own questions, from having read the issue papers, from having answered the surveys, and please come with questions. There'll be one other dynamic coalition meeting later that day, which will look at how we better coordinate the work of the various dynamic coalitions. As some of you may have noticed at this meeting, we keep running over each other and find that various coalitions with similar issues are meeting at the same time. So we need to coordinate, and we are going to talk about that at a second meeting on Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you, Avery. I'd like to turn now to my MAG colleague, Mr. Flavio Wagner. Flavio was very instrumental in last year's IGF and all the preparations in Brazil. Flavio?
Thank you, Cheryl. Good afternoon, everybody. So the main session I am facilitating together with other fellow MAG members is entitled Shaping the Future of Internet Governance, an open dialogue between pioneers and young leaders. This main session has been designed to provoke a conversation between different generations about the state of the art of the Internet ecosystem, proposing a future agenda for this environment. The session shall address 5 main policy questions, which are directly related to the engagement and contribution of the younger generations to the evolution of the Internet ecosystem and how they can work together with the older generations. So we will have 10 speakers, 5 pioneers, 5 young leaders. They represent all continents and stakeholder groups. This main session will be held on Friday with a total duration of 2 hours and will be comprised of 2 segments. So in the first segment of the session from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m., each of the 5 policy questions will be addressed by 1 pioneer and 1 young leader. The second segment of the session from 3 to 3:30 p.m. will host an open mic dialogue session with interventions by the audience and remote participants. This main session connects to many other sessions in the IGF that directly deal with youth engagement. I mentioned, for instance, Workshop 84 on Wednesday noon, dealing with youth in Internet governance, capacity building versus policy discussion. The Workshop 126 on Friday morning about safe and secure cyberspace for youth. The Workshop 225, also on Friday morning, on hands-on youth-driven Internet initiatives. This main session also relates to the Youth Dynamic Coalition on Internet governance, which will have its meeting on Friday morning. We expect that as an outcome of the session, a permanent track of cross-generational dialogue will be created within the IGF ecosystem and also at the national and regional IGF initiatives. So I'm looking forward to see you all at the main session on Friday and expect a very lively discussion, especially involving the youth. Thank you.
Thank you, Flavio. I'd like to turn now to my colleague, Ms. Jackson Key, who's done quite a bit of work around human rights at several IGFs. Jack?
Thanks, Cheryl. So I'm co-organizing the session on human rights, broadening the conversation with Ginger Pack. This is happening on Thursday, 8th December from 10 to 1 p.m. So what this main session aims to do is to reflect, deepen, and broaden the conversation on human rights and internet policy and governance at the IGF. It's also going to be organized in 3 different sections. The first section will delve into the area of civil and political rights. It will sort of have a stock taking on how far we have come in addressing some of these issues, including, for example, freedom of expression, right to privacy, and freedom of assembly and association online, and what are some of the emerging key issues that we have to address in the near future. The second section will examine economic, social, and cultural rights, and the extent to which it has been taken up in the internet governance policy discussions and the urgency of examining this, especially through the lens of the Sustainable Development Goals. So, for example, the right to health, right to education, participation in cultural life, as well as economic empowerment. And finally, in the last section, which we really hope for it to be very open and participatory, is to facilitate a conversation that will make interlinkages between civil and political rights, as well as economic, social, and cultural rights in the area of internet rights, internet policy and governance discussion. So given that these rights are meant to be interdependent and indivisible and inalienable, what would these interconnections look like, and what are some of the key emerging issues that we have to pay attention to? For example, the connection between the right to health, collection and analysis of big or open data to this end, and the right to privacy and bodily integrity. What might this look like? So we really aim to organize a session that is very open, very participatory, and hopefully can facilitate a very dynamic conversation on this. We invite you to please come, bring to the session your questions, comments, thoughts, key issues, and please don't be worried to grab a mic and join in. Thanks.
Thank you, Jack. I'd like to turn next to my MAG colleague, Ms. Renata Aquino Ribeiro, who has put together the first ever trade main session at an IGF. Renata?
Thank you, Cheryl. So about the session, trade policy and the Internet, the idea of the session is that the Internet Governance Forum was established as a global multi-stakeholder forum to address Internet-related public policy issues. But an increasing number of such issues, including domain name dispute resolution and access to registered data, the use of encryption standards, source code disclosure mandates, and cross-border information flows, are now also being dealt with in trade fora, such as the WTO, and in trade agreements such as the ones used as Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, and Trade in Services Agreement, TISA, Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, TTIP, and Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP. There is therefore a need to ensure that these discussions on trade policy are not isolated from a broader multi-stakeholder discussions. In particular, because national trade ministries and trade negotiators do not always perceive these as being Internet governance issues. It is crucial to enlighten the trade community about the importance of broader debate of Internet-related public policy issues that are discussed in trade agreements. This is a timely moment for a main session of the IGF to bridge the gap between Internet and trade. The objective of the session will be to open the discussion, providing the opportunity for high-level, high-policy interaction between trade officials, experts, and Internet stakeholders. Participants will include government officials, former trade negotiators, prominent trade experts, industry representatives, and civil society representatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Renata. I'd like to turn next to my colleague, Ms. Constance Beaumalier, who was very instrumental in starting the IGF's intersessional work around connecting the next billion, and it's been quite successful and is ongoing. Constance?
Thank you, Chair. Constance Beaumalier from the Internet Society. So on Friday morning from 10 a.m. to 11:30 will be held the main session on best practices and policy options for connecting and enabling the next billion. So why are we holding this session? The goal is to present the outputs of a year-long process of what we call IGF intersessional activities. And this is the IGF community's response to a call for more outputs. The IGF has traditionally been a forum for discussion, and there was a clear call, especially coming from the CSTD working group on IGF improvements, for the IGF to evolve and deliver some outputs. At the same time, it was made clear that we did not want the IGF to evolve into a negotiating body. So the primary purpose really is to exchange best practices. A few words about the methodology, because this is really what makes these best practices and policy options quite unique. In line with the IGF tradition, the methodology is multi-stakeholder from the beginning to the end. Every step is multi-stakeholder, from selecting the topics to collecting contributions, using the network of national regional IGFs, and also, of course, editing the draft outputs, which are currently available on the IGF's website. For 2016, we have 4 best practices, one on IPv6 adoption, another one on Internet exchange points, a third one on gender and access, and a fourth one on best practices for cybersecurity. And finally, a horizontal track on developing policy options for connecting and enabling the next billion. As I said, the draft outputs, which have been developed with the community, are currently available on the IGF website. On Friday morning, they will be presented, discussed with the IGF community towards their adoption after the IGF event. Thank you.
Thank you, Constance. I'd like to next turn to Ms. Anya Gengo, who has been instrumental in growing and strengthening our national and regional IGFs. Anya?
Thank you, Cheryl. I'm going to be speaking about the main session that is organized by the 79 national, sub-regional, regional, and youth IGFs, or as we refer to them, the NRIs. The session is scheduled to be on Wednesday, which is December 7th, from 3 to 6 p.m. Here at the main meeting room. The session will have 41 speakers that will be representing their respective initiatives, multiplied rapporteurs, and remote moderators. As an introduction to the session, an overview of the NRI landscape will be presented that will be illustrating some of the NRI records that we have so far. The substantive major part of the session is divided into two main segments. During the first segment, colleagues will be presenting on two substantive topics, which are access and enhancing opportunity for the unconnected and underconnected, followed by the second one, which is secure, resilient, and trusted internet from the NRI's perspective. The second segment will discuss the major NRI's work challenges, which are reliable and sustainable funding sources for the NRI events, as well as challenges in how to create more awareness about internet governance and why stakeholders should be actively engaging. As the session has many speakers and we are limited by time, the NRI presenters have prioritized the topics, so they will be speaking for up to 3 minutes on one of the 4 topics that they have decided on. After the second segment, we will be giving the opportunity to all of you, participants that are present here in the room on site, but also online on equal footing, to intervene and to ask whatever you would like to ask the colleagues that will be presenting. Instead of a formal conclusion of the session, the rapporteurs will be summarizing the main key points into messages that will be sent out to the wider IGF community. The overall objective of this session is to illustrate that the issues that are related to internet governance require specific solutions, as they are different across countries and across regions. It will also bring closer to us the wonderful work of the NRIs, and hopefully it will make us understanding how the NRIs are important for the global IGF. Allow me just to use this opportunity to invite you to the NRI's coordination session that will be on Friday at 10:15 a.m. at workshop room 9. This session will look into the future of the NRIs and the global IGF relationship, taking into account the work that has been done so far, and it will hopefully propose concrete steps forward. And finally, many of the NRIs have their own meetings, side meetings, for example, the regional IGF for Asia-Pacific region, the sub-regional IGF for South and Eastern Europe, and I would encourage you all to look at the schedule and to attend those sessions, as those are the unique opportunity for you to understand what the NRIs are doing internally. Thank you.
Thank you, Anya. As you can see, there's a wide variety of topics that are going to be covered at this year's IGF. I want to just ask very quickly, are there any MAG members that are in the audience or IGF long-timers? Can you raise your hands? So I want to point you all out to the newcomers, and I hope I can volunteer you. If anyone has questions, that they can go to you and they can ask you questions throughout the duration of the meeting. And I'd like now to, we only have a few minutes, but I'd like to have some open Q&A with the audience and also our online audience as well. I don't know if we have any questions remotely first. Okay, any questions from the audience? We have a microphone that's being passed around. One in the front, I see. No idea who this gentleman is?
Well, I'm making a mess out of the translation system. My name is Vince Cerf. I'm here partly with my Aaron hat on and partly with my Google hat on and partly with the hat from long days ago when the internet was still at the beginning. I have a question for the IGF attendees and for those that are on the panel. We exchange an enormous amount of information during the course of our week and during the course of the year. It accumulates, but I don't know whether it's being curated. I don't know whether we have a history that we have captured for this amazing enterprise which we've undertaken for the last 11 years, a gigantic and global multi-stakeholder effort. I think Avri and I have talked about this from time to time, so perhaps you could respond, but I hope we find a way to capture this. It's really valuable information, not only for its historical record, but also to help us gain insight from the many years that we've spent in this enterprise.
Thank you so much for that question. Brian, would you like to try to?
Thank you, Mr. Cerf. My name is Brian Gutterman. I'm with the IGF Secretariat. You're absolutely right. There is hours and hours, pages and pages of great content coming from annual IGF meetings. Much of this is on the IGF website, so we invite everyone to go there to see reports from past meetings. We archive all of the videos, the transcripts. We try and get these up as soon as we can, almost immediately after the sessions take place. We certainly do have progress to make. We want to advance and make this content even more rich and fruitful and available, particularly to those who aren't here and who might not know about the IGF. So, but please do visit the IGF website and take a look at the content, because it is very good. I don't know if anybody else on the panel wants to touch on that.
I see a hand up. Avery?
Yeah, thank you. Avery Doria speaking. Indeed, we have spoken about it, and indeed there have been several pilot projects several times that started a curation, and there are several observatories that are trying to use the information. I think at some point or other, and I can't speak for some of the observatories now, the pilot projects have all run into a financial barrier where we've done it, the group has shown that it can be done, that they can curate it. They've also shown that it's a lot of work, to tag the information so it's accessible, and so on. So I think the ideas are there, the pilots have been done. I think some of them even went to the Net Mundial initiative for funding, but none have actually been adequately funded to have a proper curation. But he's right, everything can be found on the web, but it's not curated.
Thank you. And we will definitely take this back to our other fellow MAG members as well. I think it's a great point. Next question.
Thank you, Cheryl. This is more of a comment. Hi, everybody. I'm Salanieta Tamanika Wemero, new MAG member, but I'll be commenting in my personal capacity. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the panel, and this is the first time this setting this scene is happening in this. It's sort of a social experiment, but I can see that it's working. It's very short, sharp, and really substantive. Gives us, even if this were my first time, it gives me an indication of the breadth and the depth of the wide plethora of thematic issues that are going to be discussed. The other thing I'd also like to mention is that this is the 11th IGF, but really it's the first IGF within this next decade, as Lynn had mentioned, the MAG chair. And we live in interesting times, and this comment I'd like to share with my colleagues, and that's all of you here at this IGF, because it is all of us that together make the IGF what it is. And we live in a time where you know how traditionally you have governments having three arms, judiciary, executive, legislature. In some countries they have monarchs, I understand. And then you have media as the fourth estate. But we live in a time where we've just seen mainstream media take the, sinking and that sort of thing, where people are sort of revolting through the internet and whatnot. But it's also a time where the internet is, and we continue to advocate that in the past 10 years and also in the next 10 years, that it will continue to be open and free. And so the challenge, and this is just something I just wanted to share with everyone, is given that we're moving in terms of, as Juan mentioned, trying to get concrete outcomes, tangible outcomes in terms of meeting the development goals, I think that the contributions that each and every person is going to make in the workshops and in all the thematic discussions is really going to be critical in leveraging the next phase of connecting the next billion. So with that, thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to check to see if we have any questions from our remote participants. Okay, it looks like we don't have any, but I really want to thank you all who are on the line. I know it's never easy to participate remotely, and we really appreciate having you all here with us. Any other questions? I think we might have time for one more. Oh, I see right in the front.
Merci beaucoup, madame. Je me présente. Je m'appelle Abdul Minem Youssef. Je suis du Liban. Je suis le président directeur général de l'opérateur public Ogero Télécom. Ma question est la suivante. Nous sommes à la 11e réunion du Forum de la gouvernance de l'Internet, de la gouvernance, j'aurais bien aimé dire la bonne gouvernance de l'Internet. Et je pense, même si on n'a pas mis bonne, tout le monde pense à qu'elle soit une bonne gouvernance de l'Internet. Mais comme vous l'imaginez très bien, comme moi, je pense qu'ici, ce n'est pas le seul lieu où nous pensons à toutes les problématiques et les questions liées à la gouvernance de l'Internet. Il y a certains travaux académiques, il y a certains centres de recherche, il y a des sociétés spécialisées, il y a aussi des politiques au sens politicien du terme. Les gouvernements, des ministres, des politiques qui cherchent à avoir des solutions ou même des réponses à toutes les problématiques posées par l'Internet et l'usage de l'Internet. Il y a toujours des problématiques liées au terrorisme, à la pédophilie, à certaines atteintes aux droits privés des données personnelles, etc., etc., etc. Donc tout le monde cherche à avoir certaines solutions ou certaines réflexions concernant ces questions-là. Et nous souhaitons tous avoir des impacts effectifs, des actions et des résultats effectifs. Donc, je poserai maintenant ma question qui est la suivante. Le forum que nous tenons chaque année mobilise énormément de personnes, mobilise des ressources, mobilise des énergies, mobilise un certain temps. Tout ça, toutes ces ressources mobilisées exigent peut-être une certaine mesure de l'impact. Est-ce que nous avons pensé, Madame Miller, à avoir un groupe de travail spécifique qui mesure les vrais impacts des travaux menés par notre IGF? Est-ce qu'il y a des vrais impacts? Est-ce que nous avons une influence sur les vrais acteurs de l'Internet? Quand j'ai entendu Madame Constance Beaumélard parler d'une connexion de 1 milliard de personnes sur un certain nombre d'années, mais ces 1 milliard de personnes nécessitent peut-être 500 milliards ou 1000 milliards de dollars. Dans nos travaux de toutes les années, est-ce qu'on a mesuré? Est-ce que nos travaux ont un impact? Et est-ce qu'il y a une méthode ou est-ce qu'il y a des indicateurs pour mesurer les impacts de toutes ces énergies mobilisées chaque année? Merci.
Thank you so much for that. I think a few people want to answer, and I will definitely take your comments back with respect to task force, et cetera, to the rest of the MAG as well when I see my other colleagues as well. So thank you. You had a hand up? Yep.
In order to be more straightforward, I will speak this time in English. I think that I want just to remember the origin of the IGF. The IGF came out from the summit of head of states in Tunisia, 2005, and the output was to create this space, multi-stakeholder space for policy dialogue. It was not, as it's been said in the panel, not to, by design, not to negotiate documents for action. It was perceived, and at that time, that there was a need to put all the actors in the same place and to discuss all the options for policy to face those things that you mentioned. During the time, there has been some, of course, some needs and some discussions that the IGF should have more outputs. And that is why in 2013 there was created a working group for the improvement of the IGF. And this year, we even had that process was reinforced. We even had a retreat to try to improve the IGF in order to have more tangible results, as you mentioned. I can tell you that the IGF is not something that is static in time. It's been improved. With comments like yours, I think it's very helpful for that improvement, and also the organization and the United Nations Development Agency, UNDESA, that is in charge of IGF, it's also taking that path very seriously, and this retreat has elaborated a document that is going to be out shortly. And I think we are in all that path. So your comments are very welcome, but please rest assured that the IGF should be improved for the next 10 years of mandate that last year was given by the General Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam, Avery, did you have your hand up?
Yes, please, Avridoria. I'd also like to add one thing to what was said on that. I think there have been a lot of impacts in other organizations where things that have been said here, where interactions and conversations and networking that occurred here among the different stakeholders had a spillover effect. I've seen it in the engineering organizations. I've seen it in the research. It might be a good thing for us to figure out how to measure that and describe it, but anecdotally, I have seen impact over the years in terms of who talks to who pays attention to which issues, and how we think about things. So I think there has been greater impact than we're actually seeing measured.
Thank you. I see we have a question from our remote participant. If we are running short on time, so if we can be brief, but we want to make sure that we receive your question. Thank you.
Hello. We have a participant, Suso Belieto, from the civil society at OECD, who asked the question and made the comment that it would be useful to explain to newcomers what the outcomes of this important dialogue are. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to now turn back to our MAG chair, Lynn.
Well, let me see if I can just quickly answer a couple of the comments that have just been made. And we're sorry if this feels a little squeezed. The next session that starts in here at 4 o'clock is the opening speech and opening ceremony, so we really do have a hard stop. And we are interested in how successful this was, how it can be improved. And so we're constantly trying to improve a lot of these engagements, so please, this conversation doesn't stop here. Specifically to the question that you asked, there's also the WSIS Forum, the annual WSIS Forum, which of course captures a lot of the efforts and reports on those activities as well. I do think it's a very common question and common expectation to say, what is the impact of all this effort and resource? Some of them are less tangible than others. Some are measurable, some aren't. I do think it would behoove the MAG to maybe think going forward about whether or not there's some fairly innovative way, or maybe working with the university or some other organizations to try and understand a bit better the impact. This community has always been great at identifying new work that would be useful, and frankly, we've been great at resourcing it as well. So I think we can try and be creative and maybe answer some of those questions. Again, just quickly, the MAG has been working very hard over this year, both to respond to suggestions that we hear all the time on LIST and here, and as well as to respond to the suggestions for improvement from the CSTD Working Group on improvements to the IGF, and of course a couple of the specific calls that were in the WSIS +10 outcome document. It is a continuous effort, so please do give us any additional feedback. There have been a number of innovations at this forum, and we don't have time to capture them now, but I'm committing to actually putting them in the chair's report at the end. They focus on youth. They focus on new formats to kind of reinvigorate some of the discussion. We're doing more with a lot of the intersessional work to give them specific, concrete time and more focus here. So I think we can. I just saw Brian looking forward as though there were. I'm sure there's many things I'm not recalling right at this point, but we will capture them in the chair's report. And again, we are continually looking for ways to strengthen that. Maybe the last comment I'll make is that this IGF is a very significant presence from civil society, as frankly every other IGF has. Without civil society, we probably wouldn't have an IGF. A lot of other things we wouldn't have in the world as well without civil society. But this year, they're just under 50%. Very, very interesting and very encouraging. Governments and IGOs are at 20%. So in fact, the private sector is at 17% and the technical community at 14%. We, of course, would like all those numbers to go up in absolute numbers and, frankly, some of them probably even in percentage terms, because the whole purpose of multi-stakeholder dialogue is that we're talking to other stakeholders. But I think that's a really good trend as well. And we don't have the final registration numbers yet, but the registrations to date were possibly the highest ever. I'm not sure about that, but the online registrations coming in here were over 3,000. So I think we're, as a community, doing a lot of things right. Quickly on the outputs, Constance talked to that a little bit. A lot of the outputs are just captured in the materials that are on the IGF. A lot of the intercessional work is trying to make the work that's done here more tangible, more accessible. The Connecting and Enabling the Next Billion project in particular is about localizing policy options and policy activities that were identified last year. So we are trying to find ways to make the output much more tangible and concrete. And with that, I think I really need to stop. But thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lynn, and thank you to our whole panel. I also want to thank this year's hosts of the IGF. Really, really appreciate all the hard work that's gone behind this. And the organizers of this main session, my colleagues Rasha and Virat, and all of you, have a great IGF. Thank you.
And we did it in time.
Great job.
Oh, my God.